Hey, kid, how did you get in here?
Man, you got everybody on this thing.
Yeah.
I came in to dig the sounds and check out the local scene.
Well, this is it. But we're not really open yet. You blow trumpet?
Not really. It's my brother's axe.
Your brother's axe?
He left it to me. He died.
Where's the rest of it?
In there, along with his recordings. Originals.
Original what?
Recordings, stuff that he played on, gigs.
Yeah? I'd like to hear him sometime.
How about now? I brought him with me, all the way from Chi.
You brought these all the way from Chicago?
Along with his axe. My brother Phil, he was always talking about the ocean. And how he'd like to be able to see the ocean and play his trumpet at the same time. So I thought if I could go where I could see the ocean and play one of his recordings.
We'll listen to him later. But right now I got a lot of things to finish up before I open.
Copacetic.
Copacetic?
The following film podcast frequently contains adult content, including foul language and descriptions of adult situations. Spoilers for the films discussed occur often. Listener discretion is advised. Now take it away, Dr. Rausch.
They must be destroyed on sight.
All right, we're back. It's They Must Be Destroyed on Sight, episode 173. I'm your host, Lee. What are you riding on, an iron lung, Russell? And I'm joined by my co-host, Daniel. There ain't nothing worse than blowing your cool Harper. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm hanging out in a jazz club next to a beach for some reason that is staffed by a really creepy old man who served in the Olympics 40 years ago. That's where I am.
Yeah, this is really
no one listening to this has seen this film, so
No.
none of that makes any sense. So it's fine,
But you'll be enlightened soon enough. But
it's gonna be good. Yeah.
We're going to be talking about California Dreaming from 1979, and this is Jeff Williams' recommendation. So thank you, Jeff.
Yep.
And before we get into that, we can talk about what we watched in the last little while. We both watched something. You've watched it legally. I've watched it illegally.
I don't know if I watched it legally. I mean, it played at a theater, and I paid money for it, and walked in and watched it.
So you're one of those. You're one of those suckers who pays for media.
Who pays for the full screen experience of seeing something from a filmmaker I adore. That's the
You sucker. But go ahead, Daniel.
in the former Alamo Draft House, which just makes me sad every time I go there. It was a really There used to be an Alamo Draft House in my town, and that it's now at AMC, and it's terrible now. Anyway, so yeah, we saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the new Tarantino film, and I think it's its worst film.
Really?
Yeah, no, really. Let me put it this way. It's 2019, and Quentin Tarantino is incapable of making a non-entertaining film. I think that making the film that he made in 2019 is deeply irresponsible and borderline awful, in the sense of highlighting the experiences of white men in the late 70s or in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, and it feels very reactionary. And it feels very kind of insulting to sort of the reality of Sharon Tate's real life experience, and it feels very difficult in the sense that it kind of fails to properly deal with the reality of the Manson family. You kind of end up just looking at the film. You kind of end up kind of walking away with like, and then the hippies were the real problem. So what you needed were a couple of like old school guys that are going to come in and like take care of this problem. And I feel like I don't think Tarantino feels that way about it, because from his other filmography, he's not like, that's not just the guy he is. But it also just feels really, really difficult for me. And while I was entertained during the film, I really like certain aspects of it. I love kind of looking back at that era of film. I mean, you know, you and I, we look at a lot of films from this era. Like, it's very much like I deeply appreciate this sort of like look back at cinema. I have real difficulties with the film, and I kind of, while again, I think it's entertaining, I think it's worth seeing, it just struck me as like, yeah, this is not the right move for you at this point, you know, especially coming off of
Weinstein,
you know,
yeah.
The Weinstein scandal and, you know, all that stuff. And I don't know, like, it feels like a really bad move. And that's disappointing for me. I really thought, you know, Tarantino was going to do something really interesting with this. And it's not that it's, you know, it's a film. Maybe in 5 years, stepped away from it, I'll feel better about the film as a film. But I really feel like he owed us more. And that's kind of where I went.
So first watch of this, I only watched it once.
Yeah, I saw it theatrically. I haven't rewatched it or anything.
Yeah.
I might try to rewatch it before it leaves theaters. I think it is interesting enough to do that. Anyway, please go ahead.
I was definitely entertained by it. I thought the performances were great. I don't have a problem necessarily with him, and I mean, this is a bit of a spoiler, but retelling history and changing it, because he did it in Inglourious Basterds as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, and kind of arguably he does it in Django Unchained as well. I mean, kind of on how you want to. I mean, these are false histories, and you know, ultimately, I mean, that's just kind of the thing he's doing. It's also just kind of the question of how does he rewrite the history, and that's kind of the problem that I have with it.
Thinking about it, with you just talking there about it, I think, see your point. He does focus too much in this movie and sort of being in love with like the old school Hollywood tough guys, and I think that was his focus, and it maybe kind of blinded him to some of the deeper issues that he could have explored.
I mean, he has a random stuntman like beat the shit out of Bruce Lee. I mean, I'm a huge defender of Tarantino. Look, whether you like that about me or not, that's something that I just am. And I will defend him against most of the charges of racism, you know, in his films. Like, I think it's not about like how you engage with the material, it's what you do with it. The idea of having Brad Pitt beat the shit out of Bruce Lee as a way of like establishing the bona fides of him as a badass, it strikes me as like a deeply, deeply icky thing for him to do. Like, I get what it's doing in the film. It's also like, oh man, you're just leaning into like the absolute worst impulses on this. It feels really icky to me, you know.
Although Bruce Lee's history is a little bit questionable as the legit tough guy, though.
Well, sure. I mean, but it's not. I mean, again, if we're going to rewrite the history, there's no reason to be kind of beholden to that as a you know.
Well,
like,
I mean, he's rewriting history in some aspects, but I think he's trying to be, at the same time, he's trying to be true to what Hollywood was in that sort of changing time, and he's trying to be like trying to make those characters kind of true to what they were. Like the guy who plays Steve McQueen. Yeah. That was fucking awesome. I love that. Like that, right?
I feel like we need to do a full review of this ultimately. Like, we could do an hour on this for sure.
You know, yeah. Even with my sort of cursory sort of watch of this, yeah. Definitely. But I
agree with you. The performances are really good. I mean, and again, it's really entertaining on the level that it is. My problems are so much more sort of like, why are you doing this now, and what is this? You know, what do you you know? It works as a film by itself. It fulfills the kind of Tarantino brand, but at the same time, I feel the same way about this that I feel about Sucker Punch, the Zack Snyder film. Whereas I will also kind of defend a lot of what Zack Snyder has done. And then he makes Sucker Punch, which basically leans into like the worst criticisms of Zack Snyder. I feel like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood just leans into the worst criticisms of Tarantino, is that like he's appropriating Asian culture. He's not that fond of women. He's fetishizing women. He's, you know, kind of more interested in like kind of the tough white guys, et cetera, which I think are both, you know, not necessarily true of Tarantino, but like things that are easily read into him by good faith people who I just kind of disagree with. But I feel like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a film that like it just gives ammunition to his worst critics, and I kind of would agree with a lot of those criticisms in the way they're used in this film. So and that's really difficult for me. So.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's totally fair. Like I said when we sort of briefly discussed this offline, I need to see it a couple times to like try to fully sort of engage. But I do think like you're striking on something. I'm gonna watch a few more times, and maybe sometime down the road we'll do it on this podcast if you don't already do it with somebody else on one of your podcasts.
I mean, the thing with Tarantino is that I could do any Tarantino film at any time. You could just drop me, like we could do Pulp Fiction right now, as far as I'm concerned. We did Jackie Brown, and I did it blind drunk. I don't remember what I said on that podcast. I hope it was entertaining.
You were pretty brilliant on it, so yeah.
No, the thing with Tarantino is I'm so like invested in him as an artist that like I expect more from him than this film delivered.
You definitely you care more to like. I want you to be good, Quentin.
I want you to be the best filmmaker alive, and I actually believe he is among the half dozen greatest filmmakers alive, and I want him to be that. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is not that, and it could have been, and it could very well have been. And I'm trying not to. I know we don't necessarily avoid spoilers, but I also kind of. This is the place where we're going to talk about it in detail. And so I would like to explore this in detail at some point, but I would like to give people a little bit more chance to watch the film first. But go
see it, people. Go see it.
Yeah, definitely.
And we'll talk about sometime down the road.
Yeah, in like 5 years we'll come back to it. That's what we typically do with these kind of films.
Yeah, because we got to do all of Quentin's other films before we get to that.
Yeah, I know. I would actually do all of Quentin's films at some point. Like if you want to do them, I could talk about all of them. It's not a problem for me. I've seen them all many, many times. So,
We could do a fucking Tarantino month. Like that's the best thing about him, like saying, I'm only going to do 10 films. It's like, you make it really easy for us to do 100 films.
It's also worth noting. I mean, just to be clear about this, I usually say Inglourious Basterds is my all-time favorite film. Which I know is problematic for people, but it is. That film means so much to me. Inglourious Basterds is actually, and again, the 2009 version, that is usually the film that I kind of go to. Is like, this is my all-time favorite movie. Not the best movie I've ever seen, but my favorite movie. Like,
there's a difference between favorite and all-time best. Like, you can recognize all-time best and still go like favorite. Like, for me, it's still Sorcerer. That's my favorite movie of all time. If I'm just gonna sit down and like put on a movie, and I will totally sit and watch the first 20 minutes of Inglourious Basterds every day for the rest of my life, as far as that's concerned. It's really great stuff. It really is. Yeah.
Anyway, we should move on. I think to comments. Do we have comments?
We have a couple comments here.
Or the YouTube comments is the question.
We have one YouTube comment, but it's not terrible. So, I mean, do you want to hear that one
really
first?
A YouTube comment if it's not terrible?
I get maybe it's a YouTube comment by mistake or something.
Okay, well, maybe they meant to put it somewhere else and then stuck it on YouTube.
So when we did,
we'll take the good one first. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, so when we did 2 of our Blind Dead films, we covered the Night of Seagulls and Ghost Galleon. Someone called NS
3 and 4, right? 3
and 4. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, someone called NS said, good conversation. Said, never mind a remake, here's a reboot. And he linked a trailer to something called Curse of the Blind Dead. I don't know if we mentioned it when we were talking about these films in the couple podcasts we did. Like, we did one of Cinema Psyops, and we did one on our own. I looked at it. The Blind Dead kind of design looks kind of cool. I don't know if it's CGI or practical, but it looked all right. Not as good as the Blind Dead from the original films, I'd still say. Like, I kind of like that sort of stiff, just sort of skeletal.
If we're gonna do it in 2019, if you're gonna do it modern day, like I do feel like there's embrace the animatronic, basically.
Well, here's the thing: the trailer sets the story in a post-apocalyptic world where the Blind Dead come back. Like it starts out with the typical Blind Dead story where the Templars do some satanic shit and get burned alive for it, and then when the apocalypse happens, and now the Blind Dead are back, and the remnants of humanity have to fight the Blind Dead,
which is
I'm imagining like the beginning of Terminator 2, where the Terminator like comes and like stomps on the skull of like the human being, but it's the blind dead. And I really just wish Stan Winston was still alive to make this happen, because I kind of feel like that would kind of be brilliant, and I would like to see it. But he's dead, and it's never going to happen. So I'm just going to depress the audience at this point. That's the goal.
But yeah, no. It looks all right. I'll probably watch it at some point and report back about it. But yeah, okay. I want better Blind Dead.
We'll add it to the endless list of films that we might cover at some point. We're gonna be 90-year-old men doing like podcasts about like
well, it's like what the fuck else do I have to do?
Yeah,
yeah.
It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine.
And we have 2 comments from Jeff Williams here. First off, he commented on our episode on the first turn on, and he said, and actually also I follow him on Letterboxd, and he gave the first turn on like 1 star out of like 4 or 5 or whatever. Not a fan.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but he said honestly,
it's kind of a bad movie, but we liked it anyway.
Yeah,
I think that comes across in the podcast. Like, oh no, this is terrible. It's great.
We often champion terrible shit, sometimes. Not thematically terrible shit, just terrible made shit. Jeff Williams says, honestly, I'd much rather listen to you guys talk about trauma films than actually watch a trauma film. Hey.
I take that as a deep compliment, honestly. No.
I mean, if we make those films better for you, then that's kind of cool. So, yeah.
Oh.
And his other comment is his recommendation of the week. This is a movie from 2003 called Control, spelled with a K,
right? Yeah.
It says an allegorical tale about a team of lovable loser ticket checkers working in a Budapest subway system must contend with combative passengers, an elite group of rival inspectors, and a serial killer, all while their underachieving leader falls for a feisty girl dressed as a bear.
I feel like in the post-capitalist economy where you and I don't have to work for a living anymore, we can do a parallel podcast, which is just Jeff Williams's suggestions.
Yeah,
we just physically don't have the time to do them all. But I listen to that and I'm like, I would like to see that. And B, I'm sure we could have a really fun conversation around it. And I feel really bad for Jeff Williams that we have not done more of his suggestions. It's not out of a lack of desire to do it. And I think he understands that. I think it's more just like there are millions of movies that we could possibly do. And, we just don't.
We've already set down stone. We're going to do a Jeff Williams month. So at the very least, we're going to touch on some of these. So there you go. Yeah. And I mean, we have sprinkled Jeff Williams recommendations here and there throughout.
No. So it's just everything sounds interesting, and we're like, no, we should do that, and then like, let's do California Dreamin'. Like, well, that was, it was good.
It goes back to a few episodes ago where you said like, why isn't Jeff Williams doing his own fucking podcast? Like,
he should. I would totally listen to that podcast.
Jeff, if you're feeling froggy, jump.
Yeah, that's where we go.
Throwing it out there, Jeff.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a quick break, play a little bit of music from this, some podcast promos, and we're going to come back and talk about California Dreaming.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of it.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history
up.
doll popping up at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was.
How
be a
did you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
All right, California Dreaming, directed by from 1979.
From 1979, there are many California Dreamings and California Dreamin' with the apostrophe.
Yeah.
So make sure if you're gonna Google this, it's California Dreaming with a G, 1979. That's the way to find it. Yep.
Yeah, because this is actually kind of an obscure film at this point.
Yeah.
Come for the sun, for the surf, for a way of life you've heard about but never believed was real. Come for a dream called California. California Dreaming, a sensational new movie that's gonna make you feel warm all over. Soon at a theater near you. Rated R.
I'm sure we'll get into that.
Directed by John D. Hancock, which I thought was a fake name, but no, that's his real John Hancock. That's his real name.
This should be a much more this should be a much more overtly 13-year-old boy movie to be directed by a guy named John Hancock.
Yeah.
It's not actually, it's Hancock, not Hancock, but really this should be, this film is much more mature than to be directed by that guy. Anyway.
Please. Who is also known for doing Let's Scare Jessica to Death and Bang the Drum Slowly. So he does
like a real
notable...
director. Like a real director.
Real director. It's crazy. Written by Ned
Not
Wynn.
some guy who learned how to point a camera in the right direction and like get actors to like not have shit on their shoes. That's the which we typically get with these like sex comedies. With no disrespect, honestly, like directing is a hard job, but like this is somebody who's actually done like real movies.
Yeah, this isn't like so very often you see a guy like, oh, he did a bunch of music videos. Now we're gonna give him like a $30 billion movie to direct or whatever. It's like, yeah. Whereas, you look at sort of this stuff and you look at like the model of the Italian system where you had to work your way up to actually become a director, much more sensible and much more practical.
Well, like Robert Altman, who directed like 30 films before he directed MASH, for instance.
Yeah.
And, where you just kind of work as a kind of a journeyman director, kind of doing stuff. But also that's within the old studio system, which
is problematic in itself. Yeah.
Right, it has its own issues because, like, ultimately it's a big boys club. But anyway.
Yeah. If you were an auteur, you had to make money being an auteur. That's kind of the thing.
But we're not actually avoiding talking about this film. It sounds like we are. It's really just like, we're just rambling. It's fine.
Yeah, no, we've already done a podcast previous to this and drank a lot, so yeah.
Everything's fine. Everything's fine.
This is
written. I feel good.
I do too. This is written by Ned Wynn, who also is in this film as a character. He is known for being a bit player in films like Son of Flubber, Bikini Beach, Pajama Party, Beach Blanket Bingo, How to Stuff a Wild Bikini. Son of actor Keenan Wynn, actually. Noted character actor. You'll know him if you saw him. I don't know if you know his name necessarily, Daniel, but...
I don't. Yeah, not off the top of my head, but...
But he was in a lot of great stuff. And so this is like one of his, I think this is either his first or one of his first sort of forays into writing. He did a little bit of screenwriting after his acting career dried up. And, he was in all the... this is an AIP picture. And he was in all those sort of beach party AIP films.
Yeah, it sounds like we always make plans for more movies to cover. Yeah, we should do some of those other films.
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, we've already done the first one from
the beach party.
In it. Yeah. It is starring Glynis O'Connor as Corky, Seymour Cassel, the awesome Seymour Cassel as Duke, Dennis Christopher as TT, who you would think it would be the top billed person in this, honestly, but he's not.
Yeah, he's I mean, not even arguably the lead. He's definitely the lead.
Yeah.
And yet, third build tells you something.
Yeah. Dorothy Tristan as Faye. I'll have something to say about her. Tanya Roberts in a very early role as Stephanie. John Kelvin as Rick. Todd Sussman as Jordy. Alice Playton as Corny, or Corrine, actually. Ned Wynn. Here he is as Earl Fescue, James Van Patten as Mike, Stacy Nelkin as Marcia, who actually shows up in Halloween 3 as one of the mains in that. Johnny Fain as Tinner, and Kristen Baker as Karen, and she just has a minor role in this, but I just wanted to pimp her out on the cast list here because she's in Gas Pump Girls, which we covered. And she was in Friday the 13th Part 2, which is one of her more iconic roles. Although, basically just for the wardrobe she wore in that film.
I have no memory of which person is of which role in this.
Yeah.
So we're going to do a lot of and then there's the douchey guy who kind of gets his arm broken. That's kind of where my conversation is going to go on this.
That's pretty much where
I was really hoping there was a detailed plot summary that would communicate all this to me to where I didn't have to know it, and I didn't take notes on this. So basically, you as an audience are fucked if you if you thought I was going to be a professional on this. I'm not. It's fine.
It's fine. We're both kind of winging it here. So here's the IMDb synopsis I pulled from someone called Matt282. A nerd from Chicago tries desperately to fit in with a California surfing crowd, blind to the fact that their lives are even more boring and empty than his. Which is kind of true.
It's boring and empty. I don't think boring and empty is necessarily the movie kind of goes, and it's not that they're boring and empty. Empty.
We'll talk about it. I think I know what you're getting at.
Yeah, it's not necessarily boring and empty. It's sort of like superficial and nonsense.
Yeah, there's actually some deeper stuff in this film than
there is. Yeah.
But
summary, like the summary is fine, except for boring and empty. Just seems like, yeah, no, like I get what you're trying to say, but you're wrong. Random person on IMDb.
Yeah. Matt 282. You need a
Matt
couple more
282.
paragraphs.
You needed to be more insightful for our enjoyment and for our edification.
Exactly. You need to care about these characters a little bit more. You fucking soulless bitch.
Yeah, that's where we're insulting a random person on IMDb. One day we're gonna get an email from like some person who, like Matt 282, is gonna be like, I listened to your podcast like in 10 years. Is he gonna listen and he's gonna be like 60 years old and be like, oh, you were losers making fun of me back in the day.
Yeah, well,
this is when we're millionaires based on the extended Patreon donations we're gonna get on this podcast once it takes off.
Yeah,
we've been doing this for like 5 years at this point,
Matt 282, we are immune from your criticism at this point.
Yeah, no,
sorry.
it's fine.
Yeah. So I assume this is the first time we both watched this film.
First time watch.
Yeah.
I watched it this evening.
So what are your sort of general thoughts, Daniel?
I like the film. I legitimately like the film. I would like to see it again at some point.
Same.
I think it's definitely, we're kind of doing this as part of like a sex comedy series. It's really not that. It's really much more a kind of romantic comedy, kind of a vignette film, kind of it reminds me a lot of American Pie in a way, the 1999 film. In the sense of it's got some funny bits, but it's kind of more about like sort of finding sort of real characters within that genre. It's kind of about just sort of interpersonal drama. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. Some of the actors are good, some of the actors are not so good. Some of them look a little bit like Matthew Modine, but after he's gotten like that scarred face syndrome thing, whatever that disease is, so
wow.
It's got some very pretty girls in it, but not a whole lot of nudity. It's got some there's a lot in the film. It's kind of hard to summarize. Enjoyable, kind of difficult, could be better, interesting. It's kind of where I land on it.
So my sort of general impression on this is it's very. So first off, I should just say AIP picture. This is Samuel Arkoff was producer or whatever, and he wanted a film that did something different than the usual just sort of titty sex comedy of the era. He wanted
and to be clear, AIP birthed this genre with the party movies in the early 60s. We did the first of those. This is very much a response to that in a way. Like it feels more like, let's look at the reality behind that.
And it's not even just a response to those. It feels like a response to Crown International Pictures stuff that was coming out in this era too, because it's a little bit like those films, but it's much more earnest and it's sort of coming of age kind of story.
You can see this as a bit of a companion to Van Nuys Boulevard in a way,
It is. It's kind of the aftermath.
You get hints of the van culture, in a couple of
bit.
Scenes. Yeah.
And like Seymour Cassel's character is very much like you could see him as an aged Dugan kind of thing, right?
Oh, we'll get into that character, I think. I have thoughts,
Yeah. But I like this quite a bit. I enjoyed it all the way through. It definitely surprised me because it does do several tonal shifts. At points you think it's going to be a Crown International sort of sex comedy where it's just all titties and kind of big characters that just all the problems between them are so superficial and they end up having sex in the end kind of thing. And it's like, no, it's not quite that. It actually gets deep into characters. Every character in this film almost from the get-go, very few of them are like real, who actually know who they are. A lot of these people are people trying to be something they're not. They're trying to live up to some sort of stereotypical expectation of what they're supposed to be. And that's where a lot of the conflict comes in this film.
Sure, yeah, no, I agree with that. I feel like there's a sense of there's a moment early in the film where one of the pretty girls like kind of loses the volleyball and lands in front of one of the big surfer dudes.
Rick.
And she's Rick, who's like the big kind of famous surfer guy who's the giant asshole of the film ultimately.
Yeah.
Who's the one guy where you're like, yeah, well, that guy should just die. It's fine. And she's like, yeah, throw the ball back. And he's like, he just kind of leans back, And he's the one who I'm kind of like, he kind of looks a little bit like Matthew Modine with like kind of face scarring. He's got that same kind of. At first, I thought it might have been Matthew Modine, and then I kind of did the math on the year, and I'm like, I don't know, Matthew Modine was like 11 years old or something when this was made. But at the same time, like it feels very like kind of a Matthew Modine like now kind of role, where he's kind of like that aging beach bum type. And like that's really interesting. One of the films that we did kind of back in the day was Inherent Vice, which kind of has that, which was set in the late 60s and is a much more kind of interesting, even though you didn't like it quite as much as I did. It has there's a much more of a kind of sociopolitical angle. There's a lot more kind of going on than like this is just a beach picture, but ultimately it's kind of filming the same world in a way, this kind of Southern California beach bum culture. And here what we're seeing is something that's made in 79, which is we're seeing the kind of the dregs of the thing from the late 60s, from this sort of flower power kind of drug culture, the summer of love kind of stuff. This is post-Vietnam. 1979 is one of the low points of the sort of like U.S. economy of the last 50 years. It's we're in the middle of the gas crisis. We're in the middle of the Carter administration. This is the moment at which sort of Ronald Reagan becomes the morning in America. I'm going to bring new things here, and we're going to just crush all the poor people and put all the black people in prison because like that's the thing we're going to do.
Oh, and by the way, we're going to let all the mentally ill people out in the streets with the proper care.
Right, because like this is a really key moment in American history, and the idea of kind of like the filmmakers had no like idea of this, but ultimately they are looking at this, and there is a sort of realism to the idea that like there are these guys who have just kind of been hanging out on this beach for 10 years who are kind of king of the beach because this is their world, but also they're kind of shitty people, and they're kind of, like the dregs of society at this point. And this whole fantasy about like kind of what the California dream is about what like going off and becoming a surfer from the late 60s and from these surf pictures, like it doesn't really exist anymore. And in fact, at a certain point, you actually see like our lead kind of sitting in a movie theater watching surf pictures, which are apparently taken down the road from him. That fantasy doesn't match reality. Even in the surfing footage, which is great footage. I mean, looking at like I can't surf. I never lived on an ocean, but like it's great footage, but it seems kind of gray and kind of nasty and kind of low res, and it seems like kind of a little bit like worn out. And I think there's something really interesting just kind of visually and thematically going on in the film.
It really does comment on like none of these people have jobs.
Oh yeah, except for Seymour Cassel, who
Seymour Cassel and his ex-wife, they have jobs. Yeah. Nobody else in this film has any fucking jobs.
He owns a bar, so like even then he's like petite bourgeoisie. It's not like a real like working class kind of thing. Like
he's just sort of coasting, and the rest of these
it reminds me. I was thinking. Just to throw it in, it reminds me a little bit of like Hawaii. Like we have this fantasy of Hawaii, like you kind of go off and it's like a vacation destination. But if you go to public beaches in Hawaii, so the thing is like Hawaii never gets colder than about 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Like at night in the middle of winter, like that's, and so like there's this massive population of people who just can't afford to live in Hawaii, who can't afford anything, and they just live in a tent on the beach because the public beaches are just public beaches, and you can't like legally the cops can't kick you off. And so literally if you go to the public beaches, you're literally like you're just surrounded by homeless people who to live in a tent in Hawaii because that's the thing you can do. So if you travel to Hawaii and you have the fantasy of like, oh, I'm going to live in Hawaii, and then like the economy kicks you out, But you have $100 for a tent. You just end up buying a tent, and then you just like kind of like slowly starve to death living in a tent in Hawaii. And so this like kind of paradox of like I live in paradise, but I also
Well, yeah, that's
I'm at the
totally
bottom
this,
rung of the society. Like that's kind of what this movie is about.
That's totally this culture here. Like they just the other foot hasn't come down. That's the thing. Like it's about to, but it quite hasn't yet. Yeah. So
Sorry, I went deep on this. I apologize.
no, that's good. So yeah, I like the characters in this. I think Dennis Christopher's TT is. I think he's portrayed.
He's pitched just a little bit on the annoying scale. Like,
that's the thing. Like
he's not really quite the leading man. He's not quite charismatic enough. Like it works in character, but he's not like if he's gonna carry the movie, he's a little bit generic. I kept forgetting which one he was.
He's too much of a dork. Like he makes Eric Foreman from the '70s show look like an alpha male. Like he's that dorky. Like he.
I mean, I do reject that sort of thing, but I kind of get what you're going for.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't accept the alpha male thing either. But I mean, in the context of alpha male, he makes Eric Foreman look like a.
Yeah, no, yeah.
But and I come around to him later on in the film, but early on he's just kind of grating on the nerves. Like he's that bad. And there's some awkward scenes with him.
Which was just kind of intentional with him in that, like, particularly in that opening scene where he, like, kind of goes into the jazz club. And he's kind of meant to be that slightly annoying, kind of oddball character, who's, like, really into jazz. Like, it is weird, like, he shows up and he's like, yeah, I'm like, super interested in jazz, like, high-end jazz. And I came to Southern California.
Came to California for the major jazz scene in California.
You've actually gone the wrong direction. Like Chicago was where you needed to be, and I see 79 if you're into jazz. Like,
I mean,
or at least New York. Like, go to New York, but certainly not Southern California. In a lesser movie, it would kind of become like, oh well, jazz is lame, and you need to be into like Beach Boys music or whatever.
Yeah.
Like surf rock, and he discovers surf rock is like, this is way better. My dead brother should have been into surf rock, and then he gets the big titted girl at the end, but that's not where the film goes. It just kind of like it uses, I don't know. It feels weird that he's he's super into jazz. Like, it's a bizarre moment.
I guess that's what makes you a nerd in 1979. You're really into jazz and you wear a button-up shirt or whatever. But also this notion of like you just show up in California and things are going to be all right. You'll instantly find someone who'll take you in and
well, it's California in the 70s, right?
I guess.
What's funny is there's no weed in this movie. There really should be like.
Well, there's a little bit.
There should be like marijuana stank should just pervade this film.
It should, yeah. That's a difference from the Crown International stuff. Like, there's pot smoking and shit in all those films. There's a little bit in this. And it really only just leads to one scene where he smokes a joint and he shows up in the movie theater and he's fucking high. And then all of a sudden all these titties are banging into him.
Which is a great scene, ultimately.
It's a fucking amazing scene. He gets stoned, and all of a sudden there's these like titties squishing into his arm, and then at one point some titties threaten to dunk into his coke that he's got.
And then he like lifts the coke, and like the titty kind of goes into the little paper cup, and like it's a very like overt like the director really knows how to shoot those like late 70s pre-plastic surgery tits. It's a thing.
Yeah, and then there's that shot of the girl downing that hot dog, and he's staring at her, and then she's looking back at him like at first she's like, "You creep," and then she's like, "Oh, I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing."
But I also remember being in like I'm in my late 30s. I'm a middle Asian man. I've touched titty a time or two. Like it's a thing, I'm not trying to brag or anything.
Did you do it in the Helsinki Olympics? Was that when you did it?
Yeah, I don't. I wouldn't like to. I wouldn't like to make people jealous. Ultimately,
Yeah.
I have touched a titty a time or two. It's a thing, But I remember being a young man of 16 or so, and I remember like the the moment when like the titty brushes your arm as it kind of happens in the film, and just like kind of having, especially when it's like the like, oh, that's the hot girl that I'm kind of into, and she brushed up against me in that way, and I remember that feeling, and the film accurately represents
It
like
really does
that feeling, and which is slightly uncomfortable for me to think about 16-year-old girls rubbing their tits on my arm, but that's also part of the process of watching the film, maybe. So we'll just leave that there.
Yeah, but so like I said, all the characters for the most part they're trying to live up to an expectation that they can't really live up to. I mean, with TT, that's with his I want to play my dead brother's jazz music on the oceans or whatever.
Which is itself like a weird like little premise of, yeah, my brother is dead. He has these recordings. I need to play them by the ocean because it's something that he wanted.
Yeah.
So like literally, we're gonna watch a beach summer fun movie, premised on dead brother. Like
that's the thing. Like this movie has so many tonal shifts, and honestly, that would probably be my major criticism of this film is that it doesn't quite know what it's supposed to be. Although I think at the same time, still both parts work really well. If you go into this for like the Crown International titty shit, there's still enough of that in here that it's really good. Like. There's a floor.
I mean, there's not a ton of it, based on kind of what we've seen in like Hard Bodies or some of the
it's
or whatever, but
it's not Hard Bodies, but I mean, if you look at the Crown International stuff that we watched, it's pretty comparable. It's pretty much
it's like kind of a titty beach movie. Like there's some good stuff. It tries to explore kind of like there's a guy losing his virginity, like our lead loses his virginity towards the end, and there's
they're both losing their virginity at the same time. Is
that kind of where she is too? Okay, yeah. So which kind of becomes this weird, like, again, I don't like to brag. I lost my virginity once. Not more than once. I only lost it once, but there is a bit of kind of the, like, you kind of want to be that guy in that moment, and then you realize like, I'm not, this isn't coming across in the right way, and like kind of having that like moment of communication. Ultimately it kind of like, it's difficult because like doing it for real would like kind of turn this into like more of an overtly pornographic film, And I think like the motivation of her like actually wanting to sleep with him just doesn't make sense at all.
Doesn't really. No, it doesn't.
But which is kind of one of the big kind of issues where you kind of run into the third act, and it's like, none of this makes any sense, but it's entertaining nonetheless. But it's a nice little scene of like, losing your virginity and just kind of the awkwardness that comes with that, and it's probably the best acting that dude has in the film. So,
no, like basically all it shows us is a little bit of foreplay, a little bit of nudity. I kind of love that, like, he's so inexperienced that at first he's like licking her face, he's licking her eyes.
I watched this with my wife, and she was not kind of watching the film, and I started kind of doing the, like, I was just like covering my face and looking through my fingers because it was really awkward, and she turned over and she was like, is he licking her eyes? And I'm like, yeah. And
he drools on her and she wipes it off her face.
That is not the only fluid she got in her face in this moment, in this incident. I can imagine,
Probably not.
And ironically, less awkward than what happens the next morning, where her dad walks in and is like, "Hey, nicely done," which
let's talk about Seymour Cassel for a minute.
Bullshit in this. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so first off, I think the performance is great.
No. The performance is great. The film doesn't quite frame it in quite the right way. Like, he's on point. The film knows he's creepy, but doesn't quite know how creepy he is.
So Seymour Cassel's character is Duke. He's this guy who's
he owns that jazz club, which
he owns the jazz
looks
club.
like a really fun little
looks like a bar, dive bar.
Kind of a cute little dive bar on the beach where he plays a bunch of jazz records, and ultimately, like, I'd go drink at that bar.
I would. Yeah, but Duke himself, he's he's creepy, but he's generally a nice guy-ish. But at the same time, he's this guy who just can't let go of the past, and he's very, very insecure about how old he is. He's a guy who constantly lies about his own exploits.
Yep.
He has really weird advice for TT. He tries to be a mentor.
You got to go. This is the greatest volleyball court in the world.
Mm-hmm.
This is you're privileged to be here, and it's shot in a way like you can see just how like stupid and lame this whole like thing
so
is.
lame.
You know,
Yeah,
it's such like this nonsense. Like we're just on a beach with like a volleyball net, and like this is nothing. And then it's like this is all about you got to get some ass. You got to get some ass, man.
Oh, I mean,
and like you gotta like touch the ball the way you like touch the titties, man. You gotta like really get that like finger action in, and then our lead there has to like practice throwing the ball many times in order to get like that proper thing. And then he doesn't even like actually use that technique when he touches the girl's tits at the end. So like,
no, he's
which
like
is actually kind of realistic for dudes who like get a little bit too excited.
Yeah, I mean, man,
he should have had a premature ejaculation moment. That should have been like a moment in the film,
I mean, if I was his age and I was with that girl, that probably would have happened. But I mean, god damn,
if I was with that girl now,
maybe even she could.
Well, I wouldn't like to say premature ejaculation, and I mean, she's supposed to be like 17, so like clearly that's not something that
yeah.
I don't know how it's supposed to be. They don't really define anybody's ages here, which is probably a good thing.
I don't want to Seymour Cassel it up here or anything like that,
And,
but
we'll begin like watching like teenage girls like in bikinis, and ultimately, it's kind of uncomfortable. Just how much like you feel kind of like a creepy guy, unless you're actively not trying to be that. That's kind of the goal, is to not be Seymour Cassel. God, are we doing this film as a criticism of ourselves? I didn't quite process that. Maybe this is like a meta commentary on this whole podcast. Like, ultimately we are that creepy guy.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie about my exploits in the Olympics though. Like let's
sure. Yeah.
But
I mean, I was in the Olympics, sure. I mean, clearly, I did gymnastics in the 2002 games. It's fine.
Right.
They didn't do gymnastics in the 2002. That was the Winter Games. That's the joke I was trying to make. So.
All right. Well,
I'm sure there's like one person listening who thought that was really funny, but
You assumed that me as a Canadian knew what the Winter Games were, right? You racist.
That's the thing. I am a deeply, deeply racist person.
But I mean, I wish I knew back in the day that kissing volleyballs would get me laid. Because Jesus, I would have joined the fucking volleyball team.
I love the way that sequence is shot, and like all the sequences of him like throwing the ball, because they just sort of like frame the camera slightly above where his hands are. So basically, he's just like moving his hands out of frame, and then they like layer in like the audio of the ball, but you don't actually see him like throwing the ball, and it's very clearly, he didn't actually know how to deal with a volleyball, and they just like shot it in a way that he didn't have to, which is fine. No criticisms, really. It's actually pretty well done, unless you like notice it at all, and then it's like, oh yeah, this is really creepy.
Yeah. But Seymour Cassel, his character is probably the most fully realized one in the story. I think, like, best actor in the story by far. Like he does a great job. Creepy as fuck talking to his daughter though, like a little too hippie-ish liberal about it's like, hey, you got great tits, you should go out and get laid. Like, at one point, he basically says that to her, like early on. I mean,
being a sex positive is one thing, and like actively encouraging her to like. There's a sense in which he's actually kind of lusting after his own daughter, which is definitely not. But also like in character, like if we're supposed to kind of treat him as he's kind of, in a way, he's kind of the villain of the piece. He
puts TT on the wrong path.
He's the Donald Trump of this film, ultimately, lusting after his own daughter.
Well,
I can imagine him saying at that volleyball court. This is the A court.
Yeah.
This is the A.
This is the A court. It's the best court.
This is the best court. And
good people.
If you show up here, they let you do it. It's fine. Yeah.
Good people play at this volleyball court. If the women that show up at the A court, they'll let you do anything. They'll let you touch it. Like, you can grab them right by the pussy.
You can grab them right by the pussy. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this guy's Donald Trump. We've just.
Nah, I don't buy that Seymour Cassel's character here is that sinister.
He's not that sinister.
He's just a sad, clueless guy who's really self-conscious about his age, and he's kind of a lame wad. But generally, he's not a malicious dude. But the movie doesn't do him any favors. Let's put it that way.
Well, the movie does the actor a lot of favors in terms of like kind of giving him the ability to kind of go as creepy as he needs to be. So the actor, like Seymour Cassel, is able to like kind of portray this really interesting character. The problem is that like the character he's asked to portray is really creepy, and so
And there's
the film doesn't quite like the film knows he's creepy, but doesn't quite get how creepy he is. It's kind of
I mean,
he's still supposed to be kind of a guy that we're supposed to like kind of feel for.
Yeah, we're supposed to feel sorry when he takes the fucking Widowmaker at the volleyball game at the end. Where he just drops dead.
Yeah, so God, there's so much in this film. We're definitely not going to get to it, but like, so he gets back with his ex-wife.
Faye, I love Faye. By the way, she's my favorite.
Faye is great. Faye is great.
I would.
We'll get to her in a second.
Okay.
I just want to. So he gets back with his ex-wife, and he gets laid, and then he walks into his daughter's bedroom where she's now slept with the kind of sort of adopted son, who, is just kind of the jazz guy, and they fucked. And then his ex-wife is kind of like, leave them alone. It's fine. We'll go make breakfast. Everything, no, I gotta go like, tell my daughter that I know that she just had sex and I'm proud or something, like, and which there's a time and a place, you fucking asshole.
This is like something like Kevin Smith would say, the butt fucking Brady Bunch or something like that.
Like he just kind of walks in and he like touches his daughter and like, oh, good job, girl, you just had sex for the first time. And not even in a like just like in a super creepy dude way, like, and then they go to volleyball and he dies. So like his wife and our lead his daughter and our lead get laid, and he gets back with his wife, and then the next day he dies.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a serial killer movie. Sex equals death.
But oh man, I love Faye. I love her so much.
Yeah.
Like
it predates Porky's a bit because you get the scene like through the peephole of her like changing clothes. She's gotta be like, I mean, she's definitely in that kind of MILF territory.
She was like 37 at that point, I think.
And she looks great. And there's a scene like right at the beginning where she's kind of like hanging out with, I guess technically not her daughter, but there's sort of a mother-daughter relationship kind of going on between them. And she's like, I shouldn't want to have to run. I don't want to keep fit because
I totally agree with her. Running is bullshit.
Running is bullshit. And then like a bunch of like dude bro surfers walk by. And it's like, what, are we trying to be fit for those guys? And the daughter is kind of like, yeah, they're fine. Like, give them something to look at. Like, come on, keep yourself fit. And it's kind of like a goofy, fun moment, like of like two women just sort of like acknowledge, like there's a kind of a deeply feminist reading of that, where, she's like saying like, yeah, this is problematic and awful, but also like, like
it's fun at the same time. Yeah,
it's nice to be fun and to kind of have that moment. And ultimately, we live on the beach, and this is just kind of the reality of our world. And
all the major female characters in this film actually sort of come to the realization that most of these dudes are crap. Like, they really do.
Dudes, there is no good man in this film. Like,
Yeah.
No. There's one. There's one good man in this film.
The guy who lives in the car.
The guy who lives in the car. He realizes that like he's after the one really terrible woman, and deals with that in the way he does.
Yeah, which is great.
Which is great. It was a great moment. Imagine living in a car for 6 weeks and then being like, fuck that shit.
Yeah, like
I don't know.
He does.
Are we going to get into this into the subplot? Should we describe the subplot?
Okay, so just briefly. So there's this mechanic character who's the sort of everyman guy. He's infatuated a little bit with the waitress at the local diner who is she's a gold digger. She's looking for the man who will give her the most income. The most status, right. Most income.
Yep.
There's the character played by the writer of the film who comes in. He's the rich guy. He's got the fancy car. He makes a bet with the mechanic. Hey, if you can live in your shitty car for a month and a half or whatever, then I'll give you $25,000 in my car or whatever. And
right.
And you can do whatever you want with it. So initially he's like, okay, if I do this, I'll win the affections of the waitress because she's sort of bouncing between the two guys. And then as he's basically just sitting in this car for a month
he's literally
and a half.
Tortured by sitting in that car which is literally, there's a Twilight Zone episode that does this exact thing, although it's not in a car, there's a guy who's like rich asshole who says to another rich asshole, you talk too fucking much, where can you live in my basement in a soundproof thing that's going to like detect your slightest sound that you make, and for a year, I think is what it is. And it's revealed at the end like he cut his vocal cords, and then he doesn't get the money because the guy like goes broke while he's so yeah, it's a Twilight Zone episode. It's brilliant. I just ruined the ending of a thing that's 50 years old, but like fuck you if you haven't seen it.
Bastard. You monster, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this is great. Like,
yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it actually compares like sort of favorably to that in a way, because like while it's not as dark as that, like ultimately it's really kind of about this guy kind of realizing during this ordeal that yeah, this woman isn't worth all of this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to get the money. And then he wins the car. And like the moment he wins the car, he covers it in cement.
Yeah. With his Mexican sidekick.
Oh, God.
Let's talk about him for a sec, just because.
Yeah.
So
the one guy who actually works for a living because he knows how to work an arc welder.
Yeah.
But also the most racist caricature that I've seen in a film in a while.
Such a fucking stereotype.
Yeah.
The guy who is scared about what's in things. So the first thing he's handed is a bag that's the mechanic's lunch.
Oh,
and he's
handed No, that's one of my favorite little moments of the film, because he's handed a bag and like it's like, no, this is fucking heroin. I'm not doing this. Like,
anything.
No, you guys are all white. I'm not. They're totally gonna come after me for this. Like, I get it. Although they just tell him, no, it's a cheeseburger and fries and a malt, and he's like, oh, well, that's fine then. Like,
But it is a theme with him where he doubts anything that's like thrown at him. So it's like, okay, lunch bag, could be anything in here, heroin, whatever. I'm not opening it. Fuck you. The ocean. He tells our hero, it's best you stay out of the ocean. There could be anything in the ocean. Like, it could kill you. Women are trouble. Virgins are trouble. And then he proceeds
to be fair, virgins are trouble for anyone above like 20.
Yeah, but then he has the mistake of adding on to that, where he gives us his charming little rape story.
Oh God! I was literally on the like, oh, there's no rape in this movie. I'm really happy about this. Like 45 minutes in, and then like 3 minutes later, it's like, oh, the one brown character is like, you know what I like to do? I like to jump on her. Like, I wrestled in the backseat of a car for 3 hours. Hold on. You wrestled in the backseat of a car for 3 hours? Like, Jesus fucking Christ, man. And it's not like, and then I get to feel her tits twice. Like, oh my God. Like, that is, that is deeply, deeply awful. That is,
that's 1979, everybody.
That's like, that's Lars von Trier territory as far as I'm
Right.
concerned.
I was like,
I just imagine, there is within that sort of art cinema, let's make things really deeply uncomfortable. Imagine like a 10-minute version of that scene. There's this man who is trying to, feel up this girl, 40, and she's 19, and he's just sort of kind of doing he puts his arm around her and he's kind of doing the thing and putting his arm on her leg and reaching up, and she's kind of continually pushing him down. Imagine watching that for 10 minutes, not 3 hours.
no.
No. And but this is kind of what this culture was encouraging in 1979. Nobody understood what female consent was in 1979, so ultimately it's kind of okay. It's just there was no concept of women wanted sex, except that's complete bullshit, because there absolutely was. But but the film treats him as a piece of shit. But the fact that he's the one brown character we see is kind of ultimately
that's the terrible thing. And
that's the terrible thing.
I was just gonna say, first time watching this, and the first time he shows up, I was like, okay, he's a stereotype. 1979, I can deal with that somewhat. Please don't make him a rapist. That was actually one of my legit thoughts.
He's the one rapist in the
oh no, you made him a rapist.
At least we don't see it, You
don't see it.
And then what happens? Interestingly enough, our jazz freak kind of guy, he decides to engage in a little bit of take the advice of our Hispanic character, and he gets his ass handed to him. He's she almost breaks his arm, which is great. With you.
He's all drunked up, and he gets pinned on the beach by her, and he's like, best 2 out of 3 maybe, and she's like, fuck you, and walks away.
This is a sex comedy that understands that rape is bad, which
yes.
Well above other ones in this category. Unfortunately, it delivers that message. It has to feel the need to deliver that message, which tells you what you
through
need to
a Hispanic character, yes.
And then it tells it through a guy with a little bit of melanin in his skin, the only person with melanin in his skin who speaks in the really overtly
it's
kind of Mexican pidgin sort of
it's fucking Cheech Marin parody. Shit,
right.
It's that bad, but yeah, okay. So really bad spot in this movie, but for the most part, this movie kind of treats women pretty fairly.
Yeah, no, I would agree. The women in this film are treated as characters, and even in that, it was the 70s. This is House on Haunted Hill era. Mm-hmm. Rape is the thing that happens in every movie with a titty in it ever, and particularly in this genre, as much as in 2019 we can criticize it, and I think rightfully so. Mm-hmm. It does the thing that it does. It is critical of that, and it actually does not contain a full rape scene. It just kind of contains a conversation of a dude bragging about he raped someone, not in those words, and that it contains a sequence of a boy who takes that advice and is put in his place for it, and ultimately
and learns to be a better person. How about that?
By the standards of this kind of thing,
pretty progressive.
I'm just gonna kind of allow it. It's
and
not
how about
okay, but it's okay.
And how about Tanya Roberts' character, Stephanie, who is the girlfriend of Rick, the big dick in this film?
Yeah.
She tries her best to be
airport.
She tries best to be She tries her best to be understanding with him, but at the end she's like, "Fuck this guy," and she takes away his ticket and leaves him.
Well, and originally she wants him to meet her dad, so that her dad.
Her fucking dad. Her dad only wanted to see this guy, and it was like, oh, I don't care if he's a drunken lout as long as he's an Aryan Superman. I'm all right with it.
Oh yeah. Well, ultimately the dad is kind of like, oh, I like this guy because he's an asshole. There's that sort of sense of it is. I mean, the film is criticizing the patriarchy. It's criticizing the patterns by which this kind of behavior is reproduced across generations, and the fact that the dad really likes the loutish shithead, and in another world where she was not as aware of the systematic problems and was not kind of able to say no, she would have married this guy and ended up with putting a cold cut on her eye every couple of weeks because he gave her a black eye.
And this dude flat up fucking has sex with her 15-year-old cousin or whatever the fuck.
Oh God, it's so creepy.
It's so bad. It's so bad. And she does the right thing. She's like, I'm leaving your fucking ass, and I'm going to Hawaii. Fuck you.
Yep. No.
Good stuff.
I'm gonna go find a homeless guy on the beach in Hawaii and fuck him instead.
Hell yes.
She becomes a bohemian. I think that's my that's my fan fiction for her.
I mean, Tanya Roberts, one of the most beautiful women ever to show up in cinema. Her options are limitless, character-wise, even.
She's great. She's the one non-blonde in this film. This film is very much filled with Aryan Superman.
Yeah. She's my second favorite. Faye is my favorite, though. Honestly, and maybe that's just speaking to my age at this point, but it's shows she's 37 at this point as an actress in the movie. I'd be going after Faye hardcore. I
get that.
But I was pleasantly surprised, with how good this film was on sex. It was actually
it does the thing well. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. So, anything else we need to say about it, or?
I feel that we could go on forever, but ultimately, I think the listeners kind of know where we are on it, and I think we've kind of covered the high points. I really like the film. I would recommend it. It is on Amazon Prime. If you're an Amazon Prime member, you can watch it for free. So do the thing.
And it's also, there's a couple versions on YouTube. Look for the one that's basically an hour 30. That's the one you want to take. A couple of them are 240p. The one I watched is 340 or 360 or whatever the fuck. DVD info for this, there's no DVD release of this that's in earnest. You can get some burn on demand stuff.
Yeah, even the version on Amazon, it's either a pan and scan. It's not a pan and scan. It's a where they squish it. So they've taken a widescreen and then kind of pushed it in a little bit, and then I don't know. It's kind of one of those it feels like a very kind of cheap transfer in a lot of different ways. I'd love to see a properly restored version of this, but yeah.
Yeah. So next time, we talked a little bit. We're probably going to expand our sex comedy series a little bit into the future here before we do something a little different. But next time it's going to be Pick Up Summer from 1980, which is a less thoughtful sex comedy. I'll say that much. I've seen it before a couple times, but I think we'll have some fun with it, talking about it. It's a Canadian-made sex comedy, so... There we go.
Well, if it's made in Canada, it's got to be good,
Well, yeah, I mean, it goes without saying, right? But yeah, Daniel, where can people find you on the interwebs?
People shouldn't find me on the interwebs, but if you do want to find me, I'm on Twitter at Daniel E. Harper. I mostly, I've been fighting with Nazis for a while now, and there are world famous Nazis who decide to retweet me. By screenshotting me, and then they say stupid things, so I retweet them and say stupid things about them. Well, I say smart things about the stupid things that they said. And the reason that happens is because I do a podcast about these people called I Don't Speak German, and you can find that at idon'tspeakgerman.libsyn.com. And if you want to listen to me not talk about sexy comedies and goofy people in movies, but rather people who want to commit genocide, you could absolutely go listen to that instead.
Can I just put this out there? Fuck you, Nazis.
Yeah. Nazis are bad. It seems weird that we have to say that in 2019. It seems weird that that's a controversial statement.
Yeah, but it's there's so many of them around lately, so fuck them.
Yeah.
Fuck them.
I don't know anything about the fact that people just show up in my mentions and decide to be I literally have a guy who's oh no, I listened to that audio clip you said where the guy said genocidal things, but he didn't actually say I actively want to commit genocide, and I'm gonna parse that language completely and make you prove to me that he said that, And it doesn't matter that I've given you audio and a transcript that I personally produced of the things that they said. No, it doesn't matter. No, you didn't actually say the words. So, fine.
Most Nazis are cowards. But you know who are not cowards? People who go to tmbdos.podbean.com, subscribe to our podcast at Apple Podcasts, look for us on YouTube, and engage us on Facebook at They Must Be Destroyed on Sight, where they can find out what's coming up on the podcast, and they can talk with us and give us movie recommendations and tell us how crap or great we are.
What we really want is more YouTube comments of people telling us we're shit because we didn't give them the movie that we said we were just reviewing. That's what we want. I want like 20 of those to read every week, where you can just make fun of them all one by one.
Yeah. Honestly, like YouTube people, you're really fucking slacking. Like, if you're listening to this on YouTube right now, please send us a really shitty message so we can just deconstruct it and make fun of you.
Yeah. Can you imagine this podcast gets like 10,000 listeners a week, and we get 20 people every time who want to give us like really shitty YouTube comments?
I wish it would happen, because like some of our YouTube episodes, if I was able to monetize this podcast on YouTube, some of our fucking YouTube episodes would be giving us a lot of money, because we do get some pretty major fucking view counts on some of them.
Where somebody like clicks on it, watches it for 10 seconds, and then clips, because it
like
isn't
our cheerleaders episode. I could probably pay you money if that was monetized. But that's not ever going to happen.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
But thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll be back next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
All the leaves are brown and the sky is gray. I went for a walk on a winter's day. I'd be safe and warm if I was in LA. California dreaming on such a winter's day. I stopped into a church. I passed along the way. You know I got down on my knees, and I began to pray. Oh, the preacher likes the cold. He knows I'm gonna stay. Oh, California dreaming on such a winter's day. All the leaves are brown, and the sky is gray. I went for a walk on a winter's day. If I didn't tell her I could leave today. Oh, California dreaming on such a winter's day. On such a winter's day. On such a winter's day. On such a winter's
You have been listening to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. For other episodes, our links to Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and our Facebook group, as well as links to podcasts and websites of similar interest, please visit us at TMBDOS.com. TMBDOS.podbean.com. Thank you. Drive through.